The morning of my college graduation should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. For 4 long years, I had imagined this day in perfect detail. I pictured myself walking across the stage in my navy blue gown, hearing my name announced to a room filled with applause, and spotting my family in the front row, smiling, cheering, finally proud of everything I had accomplished. I had worked for this moment harder than anyone knew. While other students spent weekends at parties, I was balancing 2 part-time jobs, surviving on instant noodles, and staying up until 3 in the morning to finish assignments. I had paid my own tuition through scholarships, endless shifts at a local cafe, and an internship that barely paid enough for gas. Still, I told myself it would all be worth it when my family saw me graduate. I had reserved 4 seats in the front row. 1 for Mom, 1 for Dad, 1 for my younger sister, Sophie, and 1 for Grandma. As I stood backstage with the other graduates, my heart pounded with excitement. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for the message that would say, "We're here." Nothing. "They're probably parking," my best friend Rachel whispered, noticing my nervous expression. I forced a smile. "Yeah, probably." But deep down, unease settled in my stomach. My family had never exactly been my biggest supporters. When I made the dean's list my sophomore year, Dad had barely looked up from the television before muttering, "That's nice." When I earned a competitive internship at one of the top marketing firms in the state, Mom forgot to congratulate me because she was busy helping Sophie prepare for a date. And Sophie had always been the center of everything. At 22, she had never held a steady job, yet my parents treated her every whim like a national emergency. If Sophie wanted a shopping trip, the whole weekend revolved around her. If Sophie cried over a breakup, Mom canceled plans to comfort her. But today was different. This was my graduation. Surely they wouldn't miss this. The processional music began, and we filed into the packed auditorium. As I stepped into the bright light, my eyes immediately searched the front rows. My breath caught. 4 empty seats. Row B, seats 11 through 14, completely vacant. I blinked, scanning the crowd again. Nothing. No Mom waving excitedly. No Dad standing to take pictures. No Sophie scrolling on her phone. No Grandma's warm smile. Just 4 empty chairs staring back at me like a cruel joke. A lump formed in my throat. Maybe they were late. Maybe they got stuck in traffic. Maybe Emily Carter. The announcer's voice jolted me back to reality. It was my turn. I walked across the stage on trembling legs, forcing a smile as I shook the dean's hand and accepted my diploma. The applause around me sounded distant, muffled, almost unreal. All I could focus on were those empty seats. After the ceremony, families flooded the stage area with flowers, balloons, and proud embraces. Rachel's parents wrapped her in hugs, snapping dozens of pictures. Students laughed and cried as cameras flashed. I stood alone, clutching my diploma. I called Mom, straight to voicemail. I called Dad, no answer. Finally, I called Sophie. She declined the call. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Busy, talk later." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just busy. My chest tightened as I drove home, my graduation cap tossed onto the passenger seat. When I pulled into the driveway, I froze. The house was overflowing with expensive cars. Music drifted through the open windows. Laughter echoed from inside. Confused, I stepped through the front door. The living room was packed with people holding champagne glasses. Mom stood near the staircase, smiling brightly. Dad was shaking hands with a sharply dressed man. And there, standing in the center of it all, was Sophie. She was wearing an elegant white designer dress, admiring herself in a full-length mirror. It wasn't a wedding. It was a private bridal fitting. Mom spotted me and smiled casually. "Oh, Emily, you're home." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. Where were you? She frowned. What do you mean, my graduation? The room went silent. Then Dad sighed, as if I were the one causing trouble. Emily, Sophie's final fitting was today. Her future in-laws came to see the dress. I felt my hands shake. You skipped my graduation for a dress fitting. Sophie crossed her arms. It's not just a fitting. It's part of my wedding. And my graduation was part of my future. Mom's expression hardened. Don't be dramatic. This is Sophie's special moment. That was when it hit me, to them, my biggest achievement would never matter as much as Sophie's spotlight. And standing there in my graduation gown, diploma still in my hands, I realized I had never truly been part of their celebration. I had only ever been an afterthought. The silence in the living room felt suffocating. I stood there in my graduation gown, still clutching my diploma, while my family looked at me as if I were the one who had ruined their perfect evening. The laughter from only moments earlier had vanished. Sophie rolled her eyes dramatically and turned back toward the mirror, smoothing her hands over the expensive white fabric. You always have to make everything about yourself, Emily, she muttered. The words hit like a slap. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. All the years of swallowing my disappointment, pretending their favoritism didn't hurt, and convincing myself that one day they would finally see my worth came crashing down all at once. About myself, I repeated, my voice trembling. Today was my graduation. Dad let out an irritated sigh, the same sigh he used whenever he thought I was being unreasonable. For heaven's sake, Emily, it was just a ceremony. 4 years of sleepless nights. Countless hours spent studying while my friends had lives, 2 jobs to pay tuition because my parents claimed they couldn't help. And to him it was just a ceremony. Mom folded her arms. Sophie's wedding is a major family event. You'll have other accomplishments. I stared at her in disbelief. Other accomplishments. This was the biggest milestone of my life. And they had skipped it for lace fittings and champagne with strangers. Without another word, I turned and walked upstairs. I didn't trust myself to stay there another second. I locked my bedroom door and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my diploma. The tears came silently at first, then all at once. I cried for the 18-year-old girl who had left for college believing hard work would finally earn her family's respect. I cried for every achievement they had dismissed, and I cried because deep down, I knew this wasn't an accident. They hadn't forgotten, they had chosen not to come. The next morning I packed my things, not everything, just enough to stay with Rachel for a while. As I zipped my suitcase, my phone buzzed. Dad. For a brief moment, hope flickered inside me. Maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe he had realized how badly they had hurt me. I answered. Hello, Emily, Dad said briskly, not even bothering with a greeting. We need to talk. His tone made my stomach twist. About what? There's a financial matter involving Sophie's wedding. I blinked. What? He cleared his throat. The venue deposit is due next week, and we're a little short. I waited for the rest. Your mother and I discussed it, and we think it's only fair that you contribute. My chest tightened. Contribute? Yes, he said as if this were obvious. $8,000 should cover the remaining balance. For a moment, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. $8,000? That's right. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You skipped my graduation yesterday, and today you're asking me for money. Dad's voice hardened. Watch your tone. No, you watch yours. There was a stunned pause. I had never spoken to him like that before. Mom's voice suddenly joined the call on speaker. Emily, this is family. Sophie deserves the wedding she's always dreamed of. And what about what I deserved? Silence. Then Sophie's voice chimed in from the background. Oh my God, stop being selfish. You have savings just sitting there. I gripped the phone tighter. The savings she was talking about were every penny I had scraped together over 4 years. The money I planned to use for moving expenses once I landed a full-time job. Money I had earned while she spent her days planning floral arrangements and cake tastings. Dad's voice returned, cold and commanding. "You're the older sister. It's your responsibility to help." That was the moment something inside me shifted. The hurt that had consumed me since graduation day slowly cooled into clarity. They didn't see me as family. Not really. To them, I was a resource, a backup plan, a bank account they could access whenever Sophie wanted something. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel sad. I felt angry, a calm, steady kind of anger. I took a slow breath. Then, forcing my voice to sound neutral, I said, "You're right, Dad. Family helps family." Relief instantly flooded his voice. "Good, I knew you'd do the right thing." "I'll handle it," I said. After we hung up, I stared at my phone and smiled. Because for the first time, I wasn't agreeing to keep the peace. I was agreeing because I had already begun planning exactly how to teach them what happens when they mistake kindness for weakness. For the next 2 weeks, I played the role my family expected perfectly. I answered Mom's texts with polite replies. I told Dad I was working on transferring the money. And when Sophie called to excitedly ramble about flower arrangements, imported centerpieces, and the custom crystal chandelier she simply had to have at the reception, I listened quietly and pretended to care. "Daniel's family is expecting something elegant," she said during one call, her voice dripping with smug excitement. "You wouldn't want me to look cheap in front of them, would you?" I nearly laughed. This was exactly who Sophie had always been. Everything was about appearances, everything was about impressing people, and my parents had spent years feeding that obsession. Meanwhile, I was staying in Rachel's guest room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and half-packed suitcases, planning my future. 3 days after Dad demanded the $8,000, I got the email that changed everything. The marketing firm where I had interned during my senior year had offered me a full-time position. Not only that, they wanted me to relocate to Chicago within the month. The salary was more than I had ever imagined earning right out of college. It included relocation assistance, benefits, and the kind of opportunities I had worked relentlessly for. As I stared at the offer letter on my laptop screen, tears filled my eyes. This was it, the life I had fought for. And for once, it had nothing to do with my family. I accepted immediately. Then I made a decision. Instead of wasting my savings on Sophie's ridiculous wedding, I used part of the money to secure a downtown apartment in Chicago. A beautiful one, bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It was small, modern, and entirely mine. The rest went toward furniture, moving costs, and building the future I deserved. But I wasn't done yet. If my family wanted my money so badly, they were about to learn exactly where it had gone. The perfect opportunity came when Sophie proudly posted on social media about her dream wedding. She uploaded photos of her venue, her dress, and the extravagant decorations she'd booked. The caption read, "A princess deserves nothing less than perfection. So grateful my family will do anything to make my dream come true." The comments poured in instantly. Friends congratulated her. Relatives praised my parents for being so generous. And then came one particular comment from Daniel's aunt. "How wonderful! It must feel amazing knowing your family has this all covered." That was when I knew exactly what to do. I calmly typed my response. "Actually, I'm glad everyone's excited. Since there seems to be confusion, I should clarify that I won't be contributing the $80,000 my father demanded the day after skipping my college graduation to Attend this dress fitting instead. I hit post, then I closed the app. Within minutes, my phone exploded. First came Sophie. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shrieked the second I answered. I leaned back against Rachel's couch, surprisingly calm. "Just telling the truth. You humiliated me." "No, Sophie. I exposed you." She sputtered furiously before hanging up. Then Mom called. "How dare you air private family matters online?" I laughed bitterly. "Private? You had no problem publicly taking credit for money that wasn't yours." Dad's call came next. His voice was ice cold. "You've embarrassed this family." "Really?" I said. "You skipped my graduation, demanded my savings, and I'm the embarrassment." He had no answer. That evening, screenshots of my comment had spread through their social circle. Relatives began calling, asking questions. Daniel's family learned the truth that my parents had exaggerated their financial stability and were relying on me to fund the wedding. The carefully polished image they had built was cracking fast, and then came the final blow. The venue coordinator contacted Sophie directly. Without the promised payment, her reservation would be canceled within 72 hours. For the first time, my family was facing consequences they couldn't manipulate their way out of. As for me, I sat in Rachel's kitchen with my signed lease for Chicago and a plane ticket tucked safely in my bag. For the first time in years, I felt free. They thought they could guilt me into sacrificing my future for Sophie's fantasy. Instead, they had handed me the perfect reason to walk away, and they still had no idea what was coming next. The wedding day arrived in complete chaos. By then, I was already in Chicago. I had moved into my new apartment 2 weeks earlier, and every morning I woke up to sunlight pouring through my floor, the ceiling windows, reminding me that I had finally chosen myself. My new job was everything I had hoped for. The office buzzed with energy, my ideas were valued, and for the first time in my life, I felt respected. Still, despite the excitement of my new beginning, I knew there was unfinished business waiting back home. At exactly 9:17 that morning, my phone started ringing. "Dad." I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. His voice came through sharp and frantic. "Emily, where are you?" I glanced around my apartment, smiling faintly at the skyline beyond the glass. "Chicago." There was stunned silence. "What? I moved. You moved," he barked. "Today is your sister's wedding." "Yes," I said calmly. "I'm aware." Mom's shrill voice suddenly cut through the background. "Emily, this isn't funny. The florist is refusing to set up until the balance is paid. The venue manager is threatening to cancel the reception, and Sophie is hysterical." I leaned back against my kitchen counter. "That sounds stressful." Dad's breathing grew heavy. "Transfer the money, right now." There it was. No apology, no concern for me, no acknowledgement of everything they had done. Just another demand. I let the silence stretch long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I said, "No." The explosion on the other end was immediate. "What do you mean, no?" Dad shouted. "I mean exactly that. Emily, this is your family." I laughed softly. "Funny. You didn't seem to feel that way when you skipped my graduation." Mom's voice trembled with anger. "You're punishing your sister over one misunderstanding." "One misunderstanding," I repeated. "You chose her dress fitting over the most important day of my life. Then you demanded $8,000 like I owed it to you." Sophie grabbed the phone. Her voice was shaky, probably from tears. "You're ruining my wedding." "No, Sophie," I said evenly. "Your entitlement ruined your wedding. You're jealous," she snapped. That made me pause. For years, that accusation would have cut deeply. But now, standing in my own apartment, with a career I had earned and a future I was building, I realized how absurd it was. "Jealous of what?" I asked. "A wedding your family can't afford, a life built on pretending." She had no answer. Dad took the phone back. You selfish little. Before you finish that sentence, I interrupted. You should know something. The line went quiet. I used that money, his voice sharpened, for what? I smiled, to fund my relocation, my apartment, my future. Mom gasped. You spent it on yourself? Yes, I said simply. The irony of her outrage almost made me laugh. After years of sacrificing for everyone else, the idea that I had invested in myself seemed to shock them. Dad's voice dropped low and furious. You've disgraced this family. No, I said firmly. I finally stopped letting this family disgrace me. And then I hung up. Later that evening, Rachel called with updates from home. The wedding had fallen apart spectacularly. Without the final payments, the florist packed up and left. The venue canceled the reception access. Half the guests walked out after learning what had happened. Worst of all, Daniel's parents, humiliated by the public financial scandal, confronted my parents in front of everyone. By the end of the night, Daniel had postponed the wedding indefinitely. Apparently, he wasn't eager to marry into a family drowning in lies and manipulation. Months passed. I threw myself into my work and quickly earned a promotion. I made friends, built a life, and slowly discovered what peace felt like. Then one evening, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandma. She told me she was proud of me. She wrote that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away from those who only value what they can take. At the bottom was a final note. Your father called last week. He said he finally understands what he lost when he chose Sophie over you. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on my desk. For a moment, I looked out at the glittering city lights. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't even feel sadness. Because the sweetest revenge wasn't watching their world fall apart. It was building a beautiful one of my own. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged.